The Attorney General weighing in on the recent Privy Council ruling, the Prime Minister on gender-based violence issues, and the Minister of National Security urging victims of sexual abuse to speak out. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Simonet with your JCN News for this Tuesday, February 22nd. The Privy Council yesterday handed down judgment making conveyances from January 2011 to the present of land in subdivisions that do not have subdivision approval null and void. It is a criminal offense to sell or convey land without subdivision approval, and the latest judgment from the Privy Council makes it clear how the execution of conveyances after the new act came into force should be handled. Attorney General Ryan Pinder, while fielding questions from reporters before Cabinet this morning, says that while they do not have an exact number of properties that have been conveyed from 2011, he assumes that there's a material amount that may fall into that category.
We are looking at the court ruling and looking with respect to possible legislative amendments in the very short term to be able to address this situation. Certainly this is not something that we want to leave open-ended for the Bahamian people. There are many conveyances that have occurred over a decade now that are legitimate, that are material, and that are bargained for, that need to be preserved. So we're looking at our legislative options to see if we can have a legislative remediation of this issue so it doesn't become a vexing issue for Bahamians.
AG Pinder noted they are considering whether to proceed with one amendment or full planning subdivision replacement legislation to make it more transparent for Bahamians and to protect their rights. However, if this is not viable in the short term, if deemed appropriate to fix the situation, then an amendment will be underway. Now, the AG also touched on the role of attorneys in the issue of conveyances.
Those are certain issues between clients and attorneys that will have to be dealt with. But if we find a way to legislatively remediate this process and get the, it's akin to when you see a confirmatory conveyance, right? If there's a question on a conveyance, somebody may issue a confirmatory conveyance to make sure the title is legitimate. Although not exactly the same, we're looking at it in that regard to see if we can have some legislative fix to make sure that there are no gaps in title and no void conveyances that should be respected. And then hopefully that would deal with there being no damages to any of the property owners, and therefore if there are no damages, then there are really no claims. That's the goal of what we're trying to do in the immediate term, is to remediate that, make sure that there are no damages, that people are not risk of losing their property that they have acquired some more than 10 years ago.
While the AG did not give an exact timeline, he noted an answer should be on the way in a relatively short time. Prime Minister Philip Davis says he has given a mandate to the Attorney General to act on the Ministry of Social Services recommendations that address gender-based violence issues, including marital rape, noting that the issue could be dealt with within this term. He made these comments today during a sideline interview at the press conference to announce the Bahamas ambassador to the Republic of Cuba and the United Nations, New York.
Whether you call it marital or otherwise, rape is rape. I don't want to get into the description of rape, and I think, and I've given the Attorney General the mandate to follow the recommendations that will flow from that conference that was held last week by the Ministry of Social Services, and we'll see what the recommendations are from there, and we'll move to enact what laws that is recommended by them to the Attorney General.
Meantime, Mr. Davis also shut down critics who questioned the direction in which the Davis-Cooper administration legislation agenda is going.
What is the legislative agenda? Not everything is achieved through the parliamentary or legislative regime. There are many initiatives that don't require what I call parliamentary intervention for the purposes of enacting laws. So it is important to understand what do they mean by legislative agenda, what legislation that they think we ought to have been producing or presenting or laying on the table that has not been laid. We have our agenda and we are moving by our agenda. Where our initiatives require parliamentary intervention by way of legislation, then the legislations will in fact be laid, tabled, debated, and passed.
The RBPF released statistics revealing a 16% decrease in rape reports since 2020. Despite this, recent reports indicated increased rates of sexual offenses in the country compared to other countries in the region. With this, National Security Minister Wayne Munro says his ministry is doing all it can to combat these heinous acts. He notes that rape and other sexual offenses are crimes that depend heavily on the victim's willingness to come forward, speak out, and report these offenses.
Rape is one of the crimes that is inherently one that's driven by reporting. It's not like murder where you find a dead body. Over the course of years, certainly since I've been back from law school, a lot of work has been done in encouraging the victims of sexual offenses to feel free to make reports. A lot of work has been done and improvements made by police authority, victim care, provision to make people comfortable with making these reports. And of course, as a result, no doubt the numbers of reports would increase.
Minister Munro also notes that in addition to receiving these reports, more can be done to better educate the general public on the steps that can be taken to better protect themselves from becoming victims of sexually motivated crimes.
We need to educate persons, men and women, because both men and women are victims of sexual offenses, on how to keep themselves safe and how to maximize the likelihood of apprehension of the offender. And we would like to continue to encourage people to report sexual offenses. We understand that may well cause the number of reports to increase, but it's more important for us to get the reports than to try to in any way manipulate statistics by tampering with reporting. You encourage to report sexual offenses. The Central Detective Unit has specialist detectives employed. We've recently had a conversation with the police, spurred by the Crisis Center, where the specter of a confrontation between a victim and a suspect should not happen anymore. And so anything we can do to make it more comfortable for persons to report sexual offenses those steps will be taken.
Security Minister Munro and the police encourage the public to report any and all crimes, particularly ones of a sexual nature, to the Central Detective Unit 911 919 or visit your nearest police station. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Aviation and Investments Chester Cooper weighing in on the controversial findings of the Auditor General's report on the government's travel health visa program. Speaking just before the weekly cabinet meeting, DPM Cooper says that many mistakes were made.
I would say lapses in judgment from a governance administrative perspective, and the technical advice is that they wanted to be expedient in terms of getting the travel health visa in place. This, of course, does not excuse the need to follow the protocols of the public service, the protocols of good governance. And whilst there was time constraints, they ought to have gone back and ensure that all of the rules were complied with.
Minister Cooper noted that there are a lot of rumors in the marketplace in relation to the visa program, and he commended the Auditor General for a very balanced report.
The report will be taken seriously, and where there have not been corrections of some of these mistakes, those will be fixed post haste. I want to emphasize that these matters relate to a period before August 2021 under the former administration. The New Day government has low tolerance for these types of mistakes, and therefore we will ensure that they are corrected where they have not been in the shortest possible time frame.
The Auditor General's report found that contracts for the travel health visa program were not executed in accordance with the country's financial regulations. When asked if anyone will be held accountable, Minister Cooper says they are following through on all of the points raised in the report. Over the course of the pandemic, one may find that young students have faced literacy and numeracy issues. These are the words of Education Minister Glenys Hanna-Martin yesterday when asked for an update on where education officials are in determining how many students slipped through the cracks and missed out on classes while schools across the country were fully virtual. To that, Minister Hanna-Martin says this.
So we've just designed an RFP to put out there to get to receive proposals for a platform that allows us to diagnose the extent of learning loss for each child, individualized, and to assist in an acceleration program with each child so that there is some standardized approach nationwide.
The Education Minister adds that the ministry wants to capture every child that has suffered over these 2 years. Otherwise, the implications as they go into adulthood are bleak.
So we have to do all we can to close the gap. The pandemic was not the fault of any child in this nation, but they've suffered. And so we have to ensure that we catch up on that. We also have young people that should have graduated now. They're 17 and they lost 2 years. So we have to work with the training agency, BTVI, the Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Education, to go and find these, some of whom might even be adults now, to see how we can help them. Because losing 2 years of school is extremely damaging, and it will impact the prospects of that adult now making his or her way in the world and their own self-perception. This is critical. And if we have large numbers, it has implications for the state of this nation.
Minister Hanna-Martin accepts that this is a challenge. However, she says it's a challenge that the ministry willingly embraces. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.